If you don't know your cost per lead, if you don't know your cost per appointment issued, if you don't know your close rate, these are things you need to be able to see. You need to understand speed to lead. You need to understand that booking rate. You need to understand the review score. But more than that, you need to understand it by location. And
Yeah.
if you don't, you're almost operating blind.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Fitz and Franson show. Per usual, I'm Fitz.
And I'm Franson.
And this is the show where we talk about leadership, business growth, and those hard decisions that actually build a company that lasts.
Today, we're going to be talking about businesses that run multiple locations. I have heard a conversation from different business owners over the years where they say, hey, we're spending more money than ever on marketing, and somehow visibility feels worse. That's a signal, not that marketing stopped working necessarily, but that your operation possibly outgrew your structure.
Yeah. Or worse, your agency really has no idea, has no idea how multiple location home improvement companies actually operate. Right? They know how to run Facebook ads. That's cool. But do they really understand how a branch performance looks, right? How sales management works, right? Install capacity, what that looks like. Speed to lead issues, what are those? Where your, CRM attribution is, the recruiting pressure that you're under. Because if they don't understand those things, eventually the marketing starts to break or hits a breaking point, and the business, instead of growing, it kind of hits that stall spot.
Yeah, and the scary part that I've noticed is that a lot of these business owners, they don't necessarily realize it's happening until they start to see that those margins are getting squeezed.
Yeah, for sure. And here's where I think it really starts to get ugly. Most agencies are built to optimize campaigns. Unfortunately, not always the business. So what happens? Operators start saying, we need more leads. And the agency in turn says, great, we increased lead volume by 37%. Right? Meanwhile, close rate dropped, follow-up slowed down, the sales team is overwhelmed, install timelines are stretched, and reviews started slipping, or worse, become like getting blasted online, right? Quietly, we start to see things just kind of getting out of control slowly but surely. But everybody's celebrating the lead count.
And that's a big problem that I'm seeing in our industry right now is, business owners are measuring marketing success in isolation. The leads aren't the goal. Profitable, operationally manageable growth is the goal. And honestly, most agencies are terrified to have that conversation because it requires understanding about that actual business that a lot of agencies don't have.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think you're hitting it spot on there, Jay. A real marketing partner should sometimes be telling you, no, right? You don't need more leads right now. And most agencies will never say that because really they're afraid of losing the account or the opportunity maybe to cash more checks from you.
I definitely have felt that tension here at Powerful is I go, all right, I need to have this hard conversation with this dealer that's going to make me less money.
Mm-hmm.
I go, but I recognize that it's right for them. If I want this relationship to last long term, if I want to see them successful, which is the ultimate goal, then I need to have this conversation saying, hey, you don't need more from us right now. You need to fix some other problems.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them, a lot of the customers we've talked to over the years, Fitz, are they genuinely don't know how to diagnose what the operational bottleneck is. They might see bad performance and then immediately jump to conclusions and blame maybe the creative or the targeting or the ad spend or seasonality. Meanwhile, the real issue might be that the manager of one of the locations actually just isn't enforcing follow-up standards. And so it's not even marketing. It's something else that needs to be addressed. So here's a hot take, right? What most marketing agencies end up failing multi-location contractors because they fundamentally misunderstand operational scale, not advertising scale.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I think it's maybe one that's hard to wrap your head around because if we're doing good in one location, it should seemingly make sense to be good at doing in a lot of locations, right? Or at least two. So, Jay, maybe you being the marketing brain of the side of our conversation, can you help break that down for our audience here?
Yeah, sure. Running marketing for a single location operator, that's one thing. You're running marketing. If you're running it for 4 branches, 20 reps, multiple sales managers, different install crews, if you are recognizing that there's varying market maturity, that is operationally complex. You can't market that business the same way you market a local roofer doing 2 million a year. You just can't.
Yeah. And I think operators know this maybe instinctively, right? That's why so
Mhm.
many of them feel frustrated even when the agency technically produces leads, right? But because something still feels, I think, at the core disconnected when they're looking at it.
Yeah, exactly. We've even been guilty of this on occasion is the agency says, oh, but cost per lead is down. Oh, your cost per click or your cost per lead or cost per appointment is down. And the owner's like, yeah, but then why does profitability feel worse? So this is because nobody's connecting the dots between marketing, sales operations, individual location performance, actual fulfillment capacity, and then that customer experience. And it's everything, it affects everything. Right. And so it's important to have somebody on your team that can have that bigger conversation with you.
Yeah, I think, one of the things, and, Jay, I know, before we started working together full time, I was running 2 locations and we were a partner of yours, right? And this as well as anybody else. I think getting into it with a partner in marketing, there's a level of accountability beyond just like the leads that you got to have with a marketing agency you go into. Right. Hey, yes, I do need leads from you, but they have to be able to produce beyond just a name and a phone number. And we're going to have regular cadence of conversation and all of those things that go along with that. Right. And setting those standards of what those KPIs are going to look like and how we're going to have those kinds of important. The unfortunate or maybe the uncomfortable truth is that there's far too many owners or operators out there that are hiring agencies, hoping that the agency becomes, in and of itself, the growth strategy, right? And
Yeah.
that's a really dangerous, basket to put all of your eggs in, so to speak, right? Marketing, marketing can amplify operations, I guess, but it doesn't replace, the need to focus on all those numbers. If the operation is fragmented, right, and those conversations aren't happening, marketing is only going to scale that dysfunction and that fragmentation, right? That's the cold truth of it.
Yeah, certainly. And we've had multi-location companies over the years where on our end the communication unfortunately wasn't having that higher level discernment, and so we're spending serious money across multiple markets, and on paper everything looked healthy to us. Lead volume was strong, cost per click was good. On our end we were noticing that the booking rate was good, but what we didn't know was that profitability was getting hammered. And so we talked to the owner and it seemed frustrated. The sales team seemed frustrated, and you hear a lot of people blame lead quality. And so in a lot of cases, I love asking questions. And so I'm like, well, what's really going on? Everything looks good on my end. Where's the pain point or the bottleneck? How can I make sure we're helping you as good as possible? And what we found was one of the locations literally wasn't following up leads, and another one was right on top of it. Great speed to lead time.
Yeah. I think that, that feedback loop is critical, right? And we have to be, just like I was mentioning earlier, in our relationship prior to working together full time like we are now. I think that that's what made for a successful relationship on that end, and not just with you, but with some of our other partners as well too. You're accountable to me to produce names and phone numbers that turn into something beyond that, but I'm also accountable to make sure that I'm doing the most with those names and phone numbers that you're producing for us. And I have to also give you feedback on what we're seeing when we get them, right? Are they in the right places? Are they with the right demographics? Can we get them on the phone? Whatever that might be, that back and forth, and understanding that there is a ramp up period, right? They're not going to be dialed in on day one, right? One of the things I recognized on my end, and I think you've reinforced that with some of the partners we have at Powerful, that 90-day mark is where we start to see kind of the rhythm hit, right? We should start to see progress to that maybe in that 60-day-ish mark. But it doesn't work unless we're openly communicating back and forth and having those regular cadences. And if you don't have that, it's absolutely catastrophic. And all we end up with is just a sour taste and bouncing from agency to agency.
Yeah. And we do work with some current customers with multiple locations that they run their businesses really well. And they recognize that each location is essentially a completely different business. And so, in the story above, the owner struggled to connect the dots because reporting was fragmented. And so, they ended up using different CRMs, different processes, different accountability standards. And what we noticed on our end was the market wasn't failing. So we're over here going, hey, we're we're doing our job. And so, it was discovered that the operational inconsistency was what was making it look like the market was failing. A pretty interesting story.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in having that ability to kind of see in there is important. And
Mhm.
that like I mentioned earlier, that communication is huge, and it allows for obviously a very important distinction in that, that example there. And I'm sure many others out there as well too, because, those owners or operators that are running those companies separately there waste maybe years trying to fix, quote unquote marketing problems that are actually management or leadership problems inside of their organizations. You're fixing the wrong problem, right? And don't
Mhm.
fix something that's not broken, right? Find the thing that is broken.
Yeah, and then once you solve that and you standardize it, and I think that it's peace of mind to the owner, and it's settling to the location managers because there's something standardized that they can communicate with the other locations on as, hey, this is how I'm doing it. Is it working for you?
Mhm.
And once that stuff gets figured out, you start to notice that the marketing comes into alignment, and your cost per lead feels manageable again, right? And instead of,
Mhm.
because the close rate or the follow up was so bad, that cost per appointment seemed out of line, and then the cost per sale was out of line, and the whole time that cost per lead, that initial lead cost was good. So, pretty quickly, lead quality complaints disappeared, and not because we really necessarily changed much on our end, but because the operation matured.
The reframe here, I think, for those that are listening, is pretty simple, right?
Yeah.
Marketing is not a department anymore. I think at scale, I guess it's really part of the overall operating system.
And you definitely notice that more and more with at scale with, 10 million, 20 million. Marketing ends up really touching recruiting, sales, financing, reputation, branch consistency. It helps with forecasting, customer experience. I mean, it really helps with everything else. We've talked about this before, the, marketing, sales, operations, they kind of just, it's that perpetual circle. And so especially the bigger you get, you have to make sure that they're all giving the right information back to each other to make great decisions. And so if you've ever worked with an agency that doesn't understand these things, eventually they become pretty disconnected from reality and your side, your company. And most of your phone calls are arguments.
Yeah, yeah. Those disgruntled calls, they're not fun to have, and I think a lot of that too goes back to that setting of expectations, right? Okay, how many do I need, and then
Yeah.
what do I need out of them? And then the feedback of what I'm actually getting out of them, and
Mhm.
kind of the willingness to work together to make sure that what you are getting the most out of, and retweaking the formula as you're going through is what's important. And you can only do that with that communication both upfront and then during the process for sure. So I think it's an important thing for sure. So I think really kind of one of the things that I learned when I had the opportunity to take over marketing for our company, and we ran multiple locations. Yes, we do need a certain amount of leads, but that's not really the most important question. And if I could give advice
Mhm.
to those operators out there, that can't be the core question, right? You got to stop asking how many leads did we get, right? If that's what the only answers that you're getting, or the only thing that you're getting from your agency, that's the wrong question to get the answer to, the only question to get the answer to.
Yeah.
In fact, I would turn it more to, start asking, what type of growth did those leads actually create for us, right? Because
Yeah.
there's really a huge difference between, revenue growth and a profitable operational growth. We've talked about that a lot.
Yeah, definitely. That good agency relationship should probably feel slightly uncomfortable at times. Your agency should challenge you, push back. They should be asking you operational questions. They should be making observations about your different locations, inconsistencies that they see. They should ask a lot of questions about your reporting. If your agency just says, looks great, let's increase spend, that is maybe a red flag,
Yeah.
or at least a concern to be like, wait a minute, you didn't ask me any questions about what's going on my end.
Hmm.
And in a lot of cases, they're not growth partners, they're order takers. It's actually one of the biggest reasons I have customers come to Powerful Media is they say the last agency just spent my money and didn't give me any insight. Like, they didn't know my goals. They didn't know if I wanted to grow or stay the same. Even when I told them what I wanted, hey, I want to hire a third sales rep this summer. They didn't take that seriously and come back with a plan to scale the marketing to hit 3 reps. And so that, that idea that your agency is an order taker,
Yeah.
that's a painful relationship to be in.
I think, yeah, that's well put. So, Jay, let's maybe give the audience here some concrete steps, so to speak, that they can maybe do or take away from today's episode to make sure that they're not falling into this trap of, I think, what ends up being kind of a continual rotation of different agencies who are just cashing checks for them, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe we give them a couple of steps they can walk away with.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. And, Matt, you and I love talking about numbers.
Just a little bit.
Numbers,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
And so, when you're looking at reporting, if you don't know your cost per lead, if you don't know your cost per appointment issued, if you don't know your close rate, these are things you need to be able to see. You need to understand speed to lead. You need to understand that booking rate. You need to understand the review score. But more than that, you need to understand it by location. And
yeah.
if you don't, you're almost operating blind. And an agency can't really help if you can't answer the questions that they're asking you.
Yeah, you essentially become the blind leading the blind at that point. There's no doubt. So,
Mhm.
yeah, so I think point number two or step number two of this, like audit for yourself, right? I would standardize maybe some of your, follow up expectations, both for your internal marketing team and maybe your sales team
Mhm.
as well too. So, you can't compare marketing performance in, every branch if every branch handles your leads differently, right? One branch
Yeah.
calling it in 3 minutes, another branch calling it tomorrow morning, right?
Yeah.
That's
Ouch.
well, yeah, that would be very, very bad. For the record, that's really bad. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, that's just a massive amount of inconsistency. So that leadership inconsistency and not holding to standards is going to cause you to really not know what is working and what isn't working, right? So set those
Yeah.
standards and make sure that the leaders in all of your branches or both of your branches, however many you have, are holding people accountable to it.
Yeah. And so the third one that has been an interesting journey with Powerful Media here is figure out if you can consolidate your vendors. Powerful Media 6 years ago started out, we ran Facebook ads and we scheduled appointments through Facebook. And over the years, I've had numerous customers say, "Can't you just do it all?"
Mhm. Yeah.
And they're like, "I'm tired of this guy runs Google and you guys run Facebook and that guy I think runs my website, but I'm not really sure. I don't even know if I own the website. And I think I have somebody else that helps with the CRM and then I have this other person that handles content and you end up getting this really fragmented ownership of the customer journey. And that also then leads to fragmented accountability because it's
Mhm.
it's pretty easy to point fingers if nobody's in charge of the entire flow. And so what we've been able to do at Powerful Media is take on the website, the Google, the social, almost all of the digital all in one place, one account manager connected to all of them. And then our schedulers are a big part of that customer journey as well. And so we can give the customer one person to call instead of 5 brands and 5 numbers or emails that may or may not work.
Yeah. I think, to piggyback on that one just for a second too, I think from my perspective, having handed, over chunks of our process to people, the lift that we get from the insight that one agency gets from multiple parts of the marketing, kind of web that you put out there, so to speak, the decisions are made quicker, faster, and with a lot more information and data. So there's an advantage to that as well too. So, step four, and I give this to the audience here with a bit of a humbleness. I didn't know what questions to ask, right? But asking better
Mhm.
questions are great. So, because I didn't know what questions to ask, Jay, you can attest to this. I asked all of the questions, the dumb ones to the
Mhm.
smart ones, and everyone in between. I still ask a lot of dumb questions, that's for sure. But so, look,
Yeah.
stop asking questions. How many leads can you get us, right? As many as you want to spend, right? Is usually the answer,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
But start asking good ones, right? Where, how do you diagnose, where we're hemorrhaging, right? What leakage we have, on our spend. How
Mhm.
do you evaluate inconsistencies across different branches? How do you connect marketing to profitability? How do you handle multi-location, attribution, right? That's
Yep.
kind of the level that operators and owners should be thinking at, and that's what you should hold your agencies accountable to as well too.
Yeah. Yeah. The bigger your company gets, the more dangerous disconnected marketing becomes because at scale, operational inefficiency gets expensive fast.
Yeah, and honestly, most operators I know out there, most owners don't need more random marketing tactics. They
Hmm.
need alignment, right, between leadership, sales, marketing, reporting, the customer experience. That's I think what actually ends up scaling a business.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you guys found value in this, right? If you want help with it, coaching or training for your team, like and subscribe, follow, all that jazz.
Yeah, for sure. And if look, if you run a multi-location operation out there or a sales team of 3 or more, and you want some help with marketing, you want a partner who actually understands some of this operational stuff, and at your scale, book a call with Powerful. I can attest to it from personal experience.
Hmm.
The audit that they'll help you do, it's a really pun intended here, powerful thing that can help you out for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. All right. Next episode, we're going to be talking about a big hidden killer in the home improvement growth. So you guys won't want to miss it.
Absolutely. So it's going to be hopefully a master class and some different strategies that are out there. So like Jay said, tune in because it'll be a good one. So Jay, until next time, always a pleasure, sir.
Yep. Always.
All right. Happy hunting, everybody.
Fitz and Franson. We'll catch you next time. Same mic, same grind, big laughs, big talks. Yeah, we're built different, all right. Thanks for watching. Now get back to work.